For everyone, Peter is actually not in his office. He is sitting at the comfort of his home somewhere in New York State. But with a miracle of
Right.
technology, he is going to be changing the background. Right now, the background that you're seeing is of his office,
That's
right?
my office in New York. Yeah. I'm right in between Woodstock and Saugerties currently. But Mira didn't like my blank wall.
Don't you think, you guys, that this is great? And he has other backgrounds that he can share with us. And I'm hoping that mid conversation, all of a sudden, the background behind Peter will change. I know he has some great backgrounds in store. So we have a bunch of people here with us, and also people watching us on Facebook Live. So we're going to be talking about you as a producer, and particularly your work on the film A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Great.
So I have some questions that I received from Sabine Hoffman.
Oh,
Is the
hello,
first
Sabine.
question.
Yeah.
You and I know Sabine. She's a great film editor. So
I
she's
know Sabine
asking,
well.
my question to Peter would be if he could speak a bit about acquiring the rights to the stories and how much creative license the writers and producers were able to take.
Sure. That was a complicated process. I came to this project about 8 years ago, 8 years before we made it. When the writers, Noah Harpster and Micah Fitzerman Blue, sent me this beautiful script that they'd written, and it was a similar story but a very different script. And I fell in love with the script and with the idea of being able to reintroduce the world to the sort of what I came to view as the radical philosophy of Fred Rogers, but not through a child's eye as we normally think of Fred, but through a grown up. And I thought that was a wonderful way to show that that Fred's philosophy was a universal philosophy for human behavior. And so but when I read the script, I realized right away that the sets of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the puppets, the songs, all of these were the intellectual property of the Fred Rogers Company, and they did not have the rights to that. Fred Rogers may be a public figure, and you could tell a story about him, but we needed their rights. And so we went to Pittsburgh, where the company's based, and met with the people who run the company. A man named Bill Eisler was in charge of the company, and with many of the people who worked on the show. And we went down to Pittsburgh thinking that we'd have, a couple-hour meeting, and we had a very long meeting, and that turned into a 2-day trip to Pittsburgh, where we met Joanne Rogers and other members of the family. Joanne is Fred's widow, and we met many people who worked on the show. We went to the Fred Rogers archives in Latrobe, and it all seemed wonderful. And then I got a call from Bill Eisler a few days after I got home, and he said, "It was great meeting you, and I think you have a great project, but it's never going to happen. We don't let anything happen." And I said, "Well, I don't understand, Bill. I thought you really liked us and liked the project." And he said, "We do, but we're just very protective of Fred's legacy, as you can understand, and of the work, and we say no to everything." But I was really passionate about this story, and so being very tenacious, I wouldn't let it go. And so we ended up doing a lot of major rewrites on the script. We changed the main character, and changed the story in a lot of ways. And I just kept going to Pittsburgh, and got to know them better and built up the trust, and finally got the rights. But it took about 6 years to get the rights, and then it probably took 2 more years to get the movie done. So sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but it was a long process.
It's a long-winded answer for a long process.
Right.
And it's amazing that you stick with those long journeys. It takes so long sometimes to just to launch a production. I mean, for you,
Yeah,
it took really 6 years before you could get it, before you could start working on it for real,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, it's a long time. I have a question here from Yazid, and he's asking, what's the difference in producing a film like The Farewell and a film like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, both films that you produced recently?
You know, in some ways they're radically different. One had about a $30 million budget and one had a $3 million budget. One was shot in China, except for 2 days in New York, and one was shot entirely in Pittsburgh. One had a big movie star, Tom Hanks, and one had an emerging star in Awkwafina. Both were based on some, real life stories, real people, and so um, you know, and the farewell, shooting a movie in China was a whole new, like, it was just a completely different exercise in learning a new culture, not and working in a place where I don't speak a word of the language, and 98% of the crew didn't speak a word of English, and navigating a totalitarian bureaucracy is very challenging. So there were a lot of challenges on that movie, different challenges on A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, although it was a much more familiar environment. But at the end of the day, every day you get to work, and people are putting up lights, and you're putting a camera, and actors are bringing a story to life. So there were a lot of similarities too. And in the post process, you're just always trying to hone your story to the best version it can be. So radically, wildly different, and yet in some ways the same, in that storytelling is at the heart of it all.
Right, right. Wow. I have a question here that is quite specific about the film. It's from Sarah Higgins, and she's asking, in the last scene when Mr. Rogers is playing the piano on the set of his show, he bangs
Yeah.
the keys hard a few times. He had stated in an earlier scene that was how he released anger. Can you
Mhm.
explain what Mr. Rogers was referring to or feeling in that scene? Also, that's funny. Little Miss Sunshine, which she's just stating here that Little Miss Sunshine, which is the film that you have produced over 10 years ago, is one of her top 5 movies of all time, and frankly, it is mine as well. So go back to the playing the piano, if you can talk about that.
Cool. First of all, why not top 3? Why top 5? But thank you. It's lovely to hear that. The banging the piano. I don't have an answer to that question, and quite specifically, there is no answer. We felt it was important to show, and we tried to show in multiple ways, but we thought that going out, it was very important to show the audience that Fred was a complex human being, and he was, and somebody who did have a lot of feelings and express them, and he worked really hard at the things that 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 he asked other people to work hard at. He wasn't some sort of otherworldly person who naturally saw the good in everybody. He worked really hard at it, and that's what he was trying to ask all of us to do, and to love other people, and sometimes took a toll on him. And he worked really hard on his show. He wrote every single episode, and he took every song, and he took it really seriously. He sat every Wednesday with one of the leading child development specialists in the world, a woman named Margaret McFarland, went through the scripts for the week. He took children seriously. He took his message seriously. He took his family seriously. He took his crew seriously, and he took his music seriously. And sometimes he too got angry. Was he angry about something specific? I don't know. That was just, we leave that to everybody to interpret.
Well, I have quite a few more questions. I have a question from Shauna Ricketts, and she says, hi. And she asks, what do you think is the biggest factor that determines whether or not you will produce the project? Do you have any advice for young producers who are just starting out as associate producers on small scale projects?
Well, for me, what determines whether I want to produce a movie is the story. That's the ultimately the bottom line is I have to connect very deeply with the story and feel that it's profound and meaningful, and is meaningful in something that I care about. If I'm going to spend 8 years trying to make something, I want to care about it and I want to feel like it's worth making. So that's bottom line for me, the litmus test for everything that I do. So I'm very story driven, very script driven, and then everything else has to come together out of that. In terms of my advice for people starting out is, the two most important qualities that I think you need as a producer. First and foremost, you need to be an optimist. You need to believe that this thing that's on paper, these words on paper can turn into a movie. And then you have to be tenacious, and you have to be uncompromising in terms of your willingness to create that reality, to produce it.
I think, Shauna, that I think that was very helpful. I hope it was helpful for you. I have more questions. A question from Amanda Nassim, and she's asking, can you speak about the financing process for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? Did you already have some cash committed when you spent those 6 years working to acquire the rights?
I did. My company, which you're seeing our office in the background there, if you could see the sign there says Big Beach, that's the name of my company. So our company is financed with some equity where we're able to develop projects, and we're able to finance some production as well. And with this movie, when it became a pretty big movie, when Tom Hanks came on board, and at that point we went and sought out a studio partner, and we ended up making the movie with TriStar, which is a division of Sony Pictures, and they financed the film completely. But we financed the development. Had it been sort of a more independent film, we probably would have financed or partially financed the production, but we ended up doing it with a studio.
Right. How did you finance? I mean, just to as an extension to this question, what about The Farewell? How was that financed?
That was financed by Big Beach, and then we brought in a financing partner, a company called Kindred Spirit, and so that was pure equity between the two companies. I originally intended to finance the movie completely through Big Beach, but I thought that it would be about half the cost, but because I thought that things were pretty cheap in China, it turned out that they were a lot more expensive than I had anticipated, and so decided to bring in a partner, and we split it 50-50.
Okay, I have a question here from Sage, who's asking, I'm going to hop on the Little Miss Sunshine train, if you don't mind, Peter. Because
sure, but it was a bus, not a train.
That's right. Because it is also one of my favorite movies. Why do you feel a film like that still holds as a favorite after over a decade? More so, what was unique about producing the film versus any of the other films that you have produced?
You know, it's hard to say what makes a film resonate for a long time. That story really touched people deeply, and I think it's the combination of humor and genuine emotion. I think we balance the sort of we talked often when we were making the movie of the roller coaster of comedy and drama, but always grounded in real emotion. And Michael Arndt just wrote a really, really beautiful script, the almost perfect script, and he's an extraordinary writer. He also wrote Toy Story 3, which is to me a close to perfect movie, and the only Pixar movie with one credited writer, I think. And he's done a lot of wonderful writing. But so I think it's the script. I think it's the characters. I think that it reflects, in its specificity, it reflects a sort of a universal truth about family and a universal truth about pursuing the things that you're passionate about. And I think that just really touches people and moves them in ways and that continue to persist. But we couldn't have known that when we made the movie, that all these years later people would still be talking about it, but it's incredibly gratifying that they do.
I remember when the film premiered in Sundance. It was the biggest hit by far that ever happened in Sundance, and yeah, it was an amazing overnight success.
Yeah, it was.
Everyone was talking
something.
about it. I have a few more questions, and we will let you go in a few minutes. There's a question from Jonathan Lip, and it's back about A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. How did you get Tom Hanks attached?
Well, Tom, so when I first read the script, one of the questions is, well, who do you get to play an iconic American like Fred Rogers? Like, that's not anybody. It's a hard casting thing, but Tom was the obvious person. I couldn't say that I knew Tom, but I had a connection to Tom through. I worked for many years at the beginning of my career with a filmmaker named Jonathan Demme, and really the first studio movie that I was involved in on any level was Philadelphia, which Tom starred in. So I was around that. I'd met him a couple times, and I'm very close friends from those days to today with his producing partner, Gary Getzman, who runs the company that they have together called Playtone. And with Jonathan, we did a couple other things with Tom. So sort of been in that orbit. And so I brought the script to Tom way back when, 8 years before we made it, and he passed. And then I brought it to him again when we attached a director, and he passed. And then I brought it to him again when we had the new draft that the Fred Rogers company had approved, and we had the rights, and he passed again. And then when Mari Heller came on to direct the film, she said, well, Tom and I, we met a couple of years ago, and he really liked my movie, Diary of a Teenage Girl, and we've been wanting to work together. So every now and again we trade scripts, and we haven't found anything yet. I could text him, and I was like, well, look, he said no 3 times. So I give it about a 2% chance, but why don't you give it a shot? So she texted him, and he wrote back right away, and he said, well, to be honest, I don't think I ever really read it. I just didn't think I wanted to play another real life character. And when I first sent it to him, he had just played Walt Disney in whatever that movie was called. So he was like, do I really want to do another sort of character like that? So he said, I'm to be honest, I just sort of passed on it because I wasn't that interested in the subject matter or the character. But if you're doing the movie, I'll read it. And then about a week later, he called her up from his summer vacation, and he said, I just read the script. I can't stop crying. I would do anything to play this part. I can't do it for a year, but if you'll wait for me, I'll do it. And that's how we got Tom.
Amazing story. And just to show you that, you know, don't take no for an
Persistence.
answer.
Yeah.
Try and
It
try
was
again.
Mari who really got him. Yeah.
I have, do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, I have a couple more minutes, sure.
Okay, I'm gonna just do 2 more questions, guys. So I'm trying to figure out which one I want to end with.
I'm just going to turn on the light because it's getting really dark in here.
Okay.
Hold on one sec. You can ask, I can hear you.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go first of all with Amanda Nassim, and she's saying, Peter, can you talk about the early years of building your business at Big Beach and what it took to find some sustainability and the ability to expand?
Sure. Well, the company started when my business partner and I, Mark Turtletop was my partner who I founded the company with. We met when I was trying to get a movie called Everything is Illuminated off the ground, which was a movie that Liev Schreiber adapted from a novel, and he wrote the screenplay and was directing. And Mark fell in love with the script and came in and financed the film and produced it with me. And we really liked working together, so we decided to start a company together, which is how Big Beach started. So Mark came with some equity, and we raised some other money, and then we just started developing projects. But Mark also came with the script for Little Miss Sunshine because he'd been developing that at a prior company, and it was a script I was familiar with and loved very much. So, and it had been set up at a studio where, again, it had been 5 years and not getting made, and we decided to buy it back from the studio and make it independently. And then, you know, Everything is Illuminated was not a financial or critical success, even though I love that movie, and it has sort of resonated through the years for a much smaller audience, but there is a dedicated audience to that film. But then Little Miss Sunshine obviously was a big commercial and critical success. And so that gave us a great boost at the beginning of the company. And then that was, 15 years ago, a little more than 15 years ago, that we started the company. And we've just been slowly building it through making films. We expanded into television. And we now have we're based in New York, but we have an office in LA. And even though I say we're based in New York, I have there are probably twice as many, maybe 3 times as many people working in LA now than in New York. And I feel like the sustainability of the business is again, story driven. We're very determined to only make films based on stories that we're really passionate about. And I feel like that gives us enough success to keep going.
Thank you so much. I remember the premiere of Everything Illuminated. Gogol Bordello played in the church.
Yeah.
That was an amazing premiere. Okay, so last question, which is not about the film, and it's really about your outlook on the state of where we are now in terms of production. So Shauna Ricketts is asking, I know that a lot of production is frozen right now, but I'm wondering how you think the coronavirus will impact the production scene in the long run.
I don't have an answer. I mean, we're all just figuring it out. As far as I know, there's next to zero production going on anywhere in the world. Every film and television production that I'm familiar with is shut down, and we're all sort of every day talking about, when will it come back? And nobody really knows, because nobody knows the trajectory of this pandemic. People are eager to get back to work. So what I think, in the short term, what will happen is when it's safe to work again, and it's going to be very tricky to determine when that is. All the productions that were in the middle of production or in progress will resume, presumably, or most of them will. those crews and casts will go back and finish those films and television shows. And then the things that were lined up next will hopefully start to come back to and go next. There will be a mad scramble worldwide to get back to work. There are hundreds of thousands of people just in the U.S. film industry and television industry out of work right now. By talking to the head of the Teamsters Union in New York, who said 2 weeks ago they were at 100% employment. Now they're at less than 1% employment. And that's just one aspect of the industry. So, and a lot of companies are need to create in order to make money. Our company, the Big Beach, we went from projecting a pretty healthy year to pretty much zero revenue. So everybody's going to be eager to get back to work. There will be a mad scramble for all the resources of crews and talent and stages and equipment, and it'll shake itself out eventually. Some projects, won't happen that would have happened otherwise, and some new projects that are being developed during this period will step in. And how we emerge from this, as with every other aspect of our society, remains a big open question mark. And what will be the future of production? What will be the future of the theatrical release of movies? It's hard to predict.
Yes. Well, thank you so very much, Peter.
Thank you all for your excellent questions.
Wait. Before you leave, I want you to change the background to that one nice photo that I saw.
Oh, you want to see?
Yes, I do.
Can.
If
Here's
you
a
can.
picture.
Okay.
That's me and Tom. The first time he tried on, we did the eyebrows and the cardigan to turn him into Mr. Rogers for a camera test. And here, that's me with, you can't really see, but that's me with Daniel Tiger.
Oh, how wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much.
Right.
Oh, these are great photos. Thank you. So Peter, thank you.
Thanks everybody.
No, thank you. And stay healthy, stay safe, take good care of yourself, and we'll talk again soon.
You too, and everybody stay safe.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
Mira.
everyone.
Bye.